Welcome to this episode of Trojan Poetry. This week we have a poem by John Ashbery. This was a request, so thank you for the request. And if you have a request, you can tweet at us or send us a message on YouTube. That would be great because we're always looking for new poets.
Yeah.
And Mr. Ashbery just passed away recently on September 3rd, so there's been a lot of buzz about that. And I'm going to admit I don't know a lot. And as I was reading the poetry, I kind of ran into an Emily Dickinson situation.
Whoa.
Where
John, why didn't you call me?
Yeah, my mind began to feel like taffy, and I was really struggling.
It was like the top of your head came off?
Well, no, my mind was like taffy.
Oh,
and I was
excuse me. Can you repeat that again? What happened to your mind?
Well, my mind was like taffy,
Okay,
and I
I'm sorry to hear
really
that.
was having trouble. But I found one poem that I actually felt like I might understand. So
Thank you, John Ashbery, for that.
yes, and nothing. Obviously, that's just my problem.
And I'm not familiar with him either, so
Yeah.
this will be a good time. All
Yeah,
right.
all right. So this one's called Late Echo. Alone with our madness and favorite flower, we see that there really is nothing left to write about. Or rather, it is necessary to write about the same old things in the same way, repeating the same things over and over for love to continue and be gradually different. Beehives and ants have to be re-examined eternally and the color of the day put in, hundreds of times and varied from summer to winter, for it to get slowed down to the pace of an authentic Saraband and huddle there, alive and resting. Only then can the chronic inattention of our lives drape itself around us, conciliatory and with one eye on those long, tan, plush shadows that speak so deeply into our unprepared knowledge of ourselves, the talking engines of our day.
And so this is the one that you had a good grip on, right?
No, I said that I might,
That you might
that I
have a
felt
grasp
like I
on.
actually had some hope
Okay,
of
good.
understanding. And this
Good.
actually, last week we did the one about why poetry, the book Why Poetry, and how poetry is very associative and putting you in the mind of the poet. The poem is a machine that puts you in the mind of the poet. And that book, there are several references to John Ashbery. So I was actually thinking like, okay, I read the book, and now somebody has asked for Ashbery, so maybe when I walk into Ashbery's poems, I'll actually be somewhat confident, and I wasn't. Except for this one,
Okay, go ahead.
where I began to kind of try to make sense of, or I think I began to make sense of it. But first off, my one question is, why is it late? Right, a late echo, right? Echoes are automatic, right? They're something that just happens because of the physical properties of sound. But this one, for some reason, is late. So that's kind of a strange, obviously, first off, title,
Yeah.
right? Kind of creates a mystery of how can you have a late echo?
It's an echo of an echo
I don't know.
that happened later on.
Yes, that's perfect. But then I of course reread, and I thought about when he says it is necessary to write about the same old things in the same way, repeating the same things. And I guess I was thinking about there are lots of poems about flowers. There are lots of poems about the weather. There are lots of poems about beehives and ants. And I've thought about that, why do we keep writing about the same things? And what do we write about today? Like, could we today write about the same things the Romantics wrote about? The same kind of nature things, or we just need to write about cell phones, right, and Twitter, and can we today in 2017 write about the same things they wrote about back in the day? And he would seem, I think, to argue yes, and that we need to,
Right.
or that a poet needs to write about the same thing, him or herself, repeatedly, because it is through repetition, he says, for love to continue and be gradually different. So again, that's kind of a paradox, or that by doing the same thing over and over, somehow it changes.
It'd be gradually different, right?
Right. And for love to continue, right? So love is an act of repetition, and it's not boring because it does reveal or does allow for change, right? So part of it seems to be about writing poetry. But then I got to the second stanza, and he says, we have to write about beehives and the color of the day hundreds of times for it to get slowed down to the pace of an authentic Saraband and huddle there alive and resting. And I don't know what the it is. Is the it language? is the it poetry? Or then I even thought, could the it be love? Right, that pronoun.
Right, and
to
huddle
me, there's
there and be with you and not change or
right
escape.
alive and resting, which is such a calm, such a calm image. It's alive, it's resting.
I picture a pet or like
yeah.
a dog, curled up in the corner. And
Right. And then I got to the end. Only then can the chronic inattention of our lives drape itself around us. So that idea that by writing about the same thing over and over again, you are paying attention to it, you are loving it, right? You're showing it love by repeatedly doing it. You're slowing yourself down so that you're thinking about it more fully. But then I'm going to be honest. that's as far as I got.
Attention, that's as far as you got.
Well, and then with one eye, those long tan plush shadows that speak so deeply into our unprepared knowledge of ourselves, the talking engines of our day. So then we have talking, which is different from writing a poem, right? So we have talking and writing. The repeated writing somehow is,
It's
I'll
going
be
to
honest.
offset the speaking. You have speak and talking at the end here.
Yeah.
Right? I saw, when you mentioned cell phones, it was interesting because the chronic inattention, that's the first thing I went to, is that idea that people are never, I can't tell you how many times it drives me nuts when you're talking to someone and they whip their phone out and start, typing away. I can't stand it. And so the idea of that chronic inattention of our lives drapes itself around us. And so then I went further back to the beginning, and there's that idea of things changing gradually, for love to continue to be gradually different by repeating the same things over and over. Then the second stanza, you put the color of the day in hundreds of times, and it will vary from summer to winter. So it's almost as if you do these repetitive things in order to keep things changing.
Right.
And by doing that, in the third stanza, we can get that chronic inattention to drape itself around us, and it's okay at that point. Maybe we can finally notice these things that we didn't notice before because we're so distracted constantly, and only by this repetitive act of maybe it's writing poetry or thinking about the themes of his poems or ideas that he wants to write about, he can break through the chronic inattention. And that last stuff, or the last couple lines here, long tan plush shadows, I love that image, that speaks so deeply into our unprepared knowledge of ourselves. And I think that ties back to the chronic inattention, right? We don't even know ourselves, the talking engines of our day, like we're these robotic,
Right.
I think about
I like
social
that, the
media
engine.
and things spewing out all the time that are meaningless, and so many things that you see on TV and elsewhere that just have no meaning.
Because everything else is
And-
so organic, and then we get to engines. Right, an engine is not organic.
No, not
Right,
at
it
all.
would be-
And he says he's alone with his madness and favorite flower at
Yeah.
the beginning. There's nothing left to write about, but I'm going to write about the same old things. So maybe it's almost like he's like wistful for the past, how things used to be, what great ideas there used to be, and all he can do now is just kind of like repeat those over and over as like a mantra almost.
And he says it is necessary to write, and they have to be re-examined.
Yes, so
Right,
it's like
it's-
this compulsion that he
Right.
has.
Right. So I don't know if we.
If we've reached a conclusion,
Right.
obviously he's the idea that there's nothing left to write about, and yet he's going to continue anyway. It's that old adage, there are no new ideas, you
Right.
know? And it's like he's wrestling with that, and yet he becomes accepting of that, and,
Right.
and he's like, okay, well then that's what I have to do.
And gradually they will be different.
Right, because it's my experience. It's not,
Yeah.
Shelley's experience or, Byron or anyone from the past, really. It's my experience.
So I don't know if we've solved the question of why it's a late echo. Obviously.
Couldn't it be a late echo from the poets of the past, and
Right.
he is the late echo?
Oh, I
right?
see.
Later
Okay.
on in time, he's
Oh,
echoing
okay.
the same ideas the previous poets
Yeah.
have come up with. Because I think, like you said earlier, anybody could write a love poem. Just
Okay.
because someone else has written about that topic doesn't mean that you can't.
Yeah.
And that is writing about the same thing over and over again.
So it's not.
So-
It's one of the a latter echo, right? It's not that it's late, as in
A
it's,
latter echo.
I don't know.
yeah,
that would be one way to interpret
I think
it,
so,
right?
yeah,
Like it's
late
one
in
of the
time.
later echoes, not the.
It could be. I don't know. Obviously, that's up for John. That's up to John Ashbery to know, and us to continue to find out.
Right. Okay, well, thanks for watching. Please join the conversation in the comments on YouTube or on Twitter at Trojan Poetry DGN. Also, check out our website at trojanpoetrydgn.blogspot.com.